Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the WDSU Hot Seat. I'm Sala Kim. We continue our debates today for the November 18th runoff. Today, we're going to talk about St. Bernard Parish President. Two candidates made it to the runoff. One of the candidates, Pomes, respectfully declined to join us for the debate today. But we got the second candidate, his challenger, Landry, joining us here. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
We appreciate your time. So, Mr. Landry, we start with opening statements, and it's just you today. So let's give you 60 seconds to tell us why you think you're the best candidate for this position.
Well, first, let me say I'm Wayne Landry, and I consider this an interview for the job for people to hire me as Parish President. You know, unfortunately, my opponent didn't show up for the job interview, even though he wants the same job. In St. Bernard, people ask a lot, what's the difference in between me and Mr. Pomes? Well, beyond the education and experience, there are a lot of differences between us. One of the major differences is, for example, he took a lot of money in his campaign from people who will make millions off the port. I, on the other hand, didn't take any money. So I'm beholden to the people and not to any donors for favors. That's why I'm the right candidate to stop the port. I'm the only candidate that can stop the port. And that's why they've been smearing me with lies and just bold-faced lies because they're afraid I will stop the port and stop people from making millions. Now, the political machine keeps my opponent from coming to these debates because they think they're going to appoint him to this job, which is so important for our parish. Well, I've offered to debate him multiple times, and he hasn't. While he hides in the basement, while they bust people to the polls. Last time we had a president, how many times actually will we have a president elected that hides in the basement? Didn't work out so good for us then, and I think the people know that.
Okay, and since you were talking about the port, let's start with that question. Sure. That was my first one, because it looks like there is a lawsuit trying to stop the Port of New Orleans from moving forward with that project, but it looks like that's an uphill battle. So tell us your position, obviously, on the port. You're against it. How will you stop the port?
Well, I'm glad you're asking that. The SOS group, their lawsuit failed because it was filed prematurely. The real lawsuit that's working is the one from our district attorney, Perry Nicosia, that he has filed. So one of the key problems with the port in the lawsuits, like you mentioned, the SOS filed a lawsuit to stop the port from going to Violet. I want to stop the port from going to St. Bernard. My opponent put out a mail out saying he's opposed to the port in Violet. Well, I'm opposed to it in all of St. Bernard. So we have to put together the right team. We'll work side by side with District Attorney Nicosia, and we'll put forth a meaningful, strong advocate to litigate this thing on our behalf. And we will, in other words, we'll spend every resource we need to stop it. It's that dangerous for the future of our parish.
All right, thank you so much. Let's move on to the topic of insurance, which is another big crisis that the state is facing. Even lawmakers say they will probably have a special session to address it. From a parish standpoint, if elected as president, what can you do and how can you help to decrease the premiums and help struggling property owners?
Well, let's break the insurance down into the two components, one being flood and the other one being homeowners. The federal government has spent a lot of money building a flood wall around our parish, and then they put us in a higher flood zone. So through legislation, we can get that reduced somehow in Washington. Now, on the other hand, the homeowners insurance, the inflation that we're experiencing today in America as a whole is what's driving the cost up of rebuilding homes, cost of materials. Insurance companies who have bailed out since we're so prone to hurricanes, et cetera, in St. Bernard, insurance companies are pulling out. As they pull out, the competition's less, so the cost is more. Some of the things that we can do is do some of the things I've done. I've increased my deductible so I can drop my premium. I also participate in a home fortification program in Baton Rouge, which helps reduce. But overall, the insurance commissioner, who I've spoke with many times, basically says they can't do anything in a free market with the insurance company. So it's going to be interesting to see what legislation comes down. But we're 100% supportive, obviously, of reducing those costs if it's at all within our power to do so.
Yeah, it is such a crisis and affecting so many people. Yes. The next question, let's talk about your plan to reopen now shuttered firehouses in the lower parts of the parishes like Delacroix.
Right. Well, fire stations 11 and 12, Delacroix and Wyclosky, had been closed. And one of the issues, people think it's not a money issue. There's a lot of money in the budget. I studied the budget. I met with all the firemen, just about 90% of them, I could say. And that's not their problem. Their problem is they have a retention problem and a recruitment problem. So the proper allocation of funds is important, don't get me wrong. but putting meaningful recruitment programs and, more importantly, retention programs to keep the firemen we have will help us develop the staff we need to actually staff those firehouses. There are some monies in place already to repair them, which they haven't been repaired since the last flood.
Okay, thank you so much. Let's talk about storm protection, such a big issue for St. Bernard Parish. Places outside the federal levee protection system, they still flood. So what is your plan, if elected, to build levees and to protect residents in that area?
Well, we don't have the dollars to build levees, and I don't want to give anybody the false hope that we can build levees. But what we can do, we have about $1 billion of coastal restoration money that we can divert and put towards our Barrier Islands and get some meaningful protection from storm surges. And that's our biggest problem. We do have other little levees in place to stop they call them tidal levees, basically, that stops the streets from flooding down in those areas when there's high tides. But as far as being able to have the dollars to put new levees, we just don't have that kind of money.
And that's what my next question was about, the coastal erosion. Is that part of the plan then to protect that area? Because I know one of your platform is to secure more funds to protect those wetlands and to restore the coast. Right.
Well, in terms of protecting the wetlands, there are dollars available, as I mentioned earlier, to handle that. The bigger problem with the coastal restoration is where we're spending the money. For example, right now, this current administration has projects on the inland waters. Well, what will happen, since there's no storm protection outside, and like Chandelier Islands, then what winds up happening is that gets washed away by the next storm. So we have to, be pragmatic about how we approach this. We have to develop on the outside, then that'll get storm surge protection outside, and that'll help us on the inside where the levees won't have to be as great.
I see. All right, let's talk about a controversy from 10 years ago, which you, I know, haven't shied away from talking about as well. You and the hospital were investigated when you were the head of the board overseeing it. What has changed, and how do you handle that probe and questions about it?
Well, at the end of the day, there was a lot of allegations. Let me back up. I spent 6 years of my life. That's all we have on this planet is time. I gave 6 years of my time, 10% of my life, to building a hospital. I was the driving force, putting together all the money, had it built, operated it myself for free for 4 years. In 2015, I resigned so I could run for Parish President at the time, and in 2016, Oshner took it over. But let me just say this, there was never any debt on the hospital. The people that have to understand, it's a hard thing to explain in business. When a hospital first opens up, you don't have the ability to bill until you get a provider number. That takes time. Every month you're burning jet fuel. Let's say you burn $2 million a month. Well, in the first year, you're going to lose $24 million, right? So they're talking about $32 million. It's not money that's lost or mismanaged. The hospital actually exceeded all expectations. It was expected to lose money for 5 years. It only lost money for about 2 years. So, and I operated it for 4 for free. So the monies that they allocated that was mismanaged or misspent, they found out that was my money I spent on Christmas parties and everything else. That's why you never heard any more about it.
Yeah.
So I was actually glad that got investigated, because all that came to light. Now, my opponents want to use that as a smear tactic. Right. Go ahead, but they want me to be responsible for everything bad. But what about the fact that the hospital's there today saving lives? That made it all worthwhile.
Yeah, thank you for explaining that. A lot of constituents want to know. So why make this political comeback now? You were on the council. And why are you running back for office now as Parish President?
Well, the port is the number one thing. And look, let me just say this. I'm gonna work real close with Jeff Landry, the new governor, and I'm gonna continue working with Fred Eberhardt and our Senators Cassidy and Senator Kennedy. To do whatever we have to do to stop this port. That's my number one thing. But the thing I think that pushed me over the top to make me come back, as you put it, was not just the port. It was the fact that we passed a fire tax and we closed fire stations. I'm looking at all those things happen. I'm looking at $1 billion of coastal restoration money not being spent on Barrier Islands. All these things are wrong. I live there. I care about where I live. Whenever there was a problem in St. Bernard, I've always stepped up to the plate and helped. I don't just complain. I stepped up to the plate and helped. and I'm stepping up again.
Yeah, you're actually doing something about it, you're saying.
Yes,
Taking
ma'am.
action. Let's talk about the commercial fishing industry. I know it's a struggling industry, generations of fishermen now leaving the industry because of imports and high fuel costs and maintenance. So what is your plan to protect the commercial fishing industry?
Well, there's one thing I want to do to help them that we can do immediately, and that's make the shipyard that we have now down there free to all our commercial fishermen. But the way that we can really help them is with meaningful legislation in Washington. My plan is to get to all the rest of the coastal states to get involved with us, go to Washington and lobby to stop the quotas from being so small from imported seafood. Well, all we need to do as a country is reduce the amount of seafood we let come in our country, and that gives our fishermen, countrywide, by the way, the opportunity to make a living and keep our heritage. In St. Bernard, the commercial fishing industry is a strong, long-time heritage, and I want to protect it. I will do everything in my power to make sure that we get good, meaningful legislation to protect all of our commercial fishermen.
All right. What about the growth in St. Bernard, one of the fastest growing parishes in our area? We know a lot of residents and families are moving in, so that means you need to attract more businesses as well. Do you have a plan to attract more businesses to St. Bernard Parish?
Well, first thing I want to tell you is the business I don't want to attract is business like the port.
Yeah.
Okay? And I'm going to take a little bit of credit, if I can be so bold, about why St. Bernard is one of the fastest growing parishes. Because we have a hospital. If we didn't have a hospital, people could not move to our parish. That's one of the primary reasons. I've been out on the street. That's one of the primary reasons new people are moving to the parish, because they're getting away from the city and all its issues, but we also have health care that's easily accessible. So we need to take a good look at our economic development activities too. My plan would be to supplement what they're doing right now with economic development counties. We give money to them and then they do their own thing. I want to have some in-house activities where we actually take control over how we go forward with meaningful economic development. I would like to see us get to where we can raise the median income of the parish. I don't want these Dollar General stores, so to speak. I mean, that's not high-paying jobs. We need meaningful jobs which will help spur the economy. Everybody that knows anything about the law of economics knows money circulates at least 5 times locally. So that's what we need to do, and that'll help perpetuate, if you will, more and spawn more business.
Yeah. So how do you attract more jobs and the workforce for higher pay? Pay, not like Dollar Generals, but work that will pay them more money.
Right. You have to get with the large landowners and convince them, first of all, because you have to have space in order to attract people to it, right? And we have to convince them to not use these large masses of commercial land for destructive purposes like the port. We have to use those and bring in like high-tech industries, go after them, and then work with our local community college to train people on how to do that. So it's a complex thing, but it's worth fighting for. Yeah. And then we will do that. Yeah.
Yesterday, I moderated a debate and we talked about the workforce shrinking in the state of Louisiana. Yes. with so many talented young people leaving. How are we going to attract more workforce? Are you for specialized skills and training and apprenticeship over the 4-year college degree?
Well, let me first say this at the outset. Education, higher education like what I've obtained is really not for everybody. We need heavy equipment operators. We need other people too, In fact, I'm a big fan of education, but I'm also a big fan of vocational training. And when I say vocational training, that's all inclusive of everything that we have to do except for higher education, because those jobs are just as meaningful and those are necessary too. So when you're developing, however, a parish or county or even a country economically, you want to make sure you're developing it with meaningful jobs which your workforce can do, and if you can, train that workforce to be able to accommodate the needs of that job. So it's a well-entwined situation. You have to understand the economy, you have to understand the job market, and you have to understand business. And there are other things the government can do. There's small, minute tax breaks we can give to business, other incentives we can do, making the permit process extremely easy or favorable, if you will. to new entities. There are a lot of other things we can do, which I don't think we have the time today to go over the whole list.
All right, let's talk about crime then, because that's another issue that is on top of mind for everyone and many voters. What is your plan to reduce crime, and even working with the sheriff and perhaps even, the neighboring parishes to help reduce crime, overall property, violent crime, and juvenile crime?
Well, crime is on the uptick over there in St. Bernard. There's no question about it. And I think we're seeing crime throughout the city and it seems to be nonstop. But the St. Bernard Parish government is a funding mechanism for the sheriff's office. So I will make sure that we fund it. There's a misconception or a myth out there that because the sheriff is against me politically, that we can't work together. I promise you, I believe his best interest is in the parish, and I know my best interest is in the parish. So we're going to make sure they have all the tools they need to help stop crime. But let's keep in mind, there's a complete separation of power between the parish president and the sheriff. The sheriff has autonomy, if you will, in terms of running their department, and to the extent he asks for help, he will receive help from my administration.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Landry. Closing statements. You're the only one here, so you can have 60 seconds to make your closing statements.
Well, I am the only one here, and it's out of respect for the voters of St. Bernard that I am here. This is, like I said, a job interview, and I think it was very disrespectful of my opponent to not show up for that job interview. So I think we've touched on a lot of things that I'd like to say. I have videos out of what my 100-day plan is to attack, and most of the things we discussed today. The recreation department's also very big for me. Our animal shelter has huge problems that we need to correct, and that's a big thing, I think, for the parish. So there's a lot more things other than the port. However, when you look at the bigger picture, there's no doubt that I'm the right guy for this job. My education and background, I'm 38 years as a CEO. I'm ideally qualified to be the parish president. My degree is in public administration. My opponent, I'm not taking anything away from him. He operates heavy equipment and he cleans up storm debris. He's just applying for the wrong job. That's all, But I'd appreciate if everybody can get out and vote, because I hear on the streets everybody's tired of the political machine and everybody's tired of the apathy of their vote doesn't matter. People really need to realize if they want to do something about it, do what I do, step up to the plate and do it. Do your part. Get out there and vote, even if you're not voting for me. Go vote. Your vote can make a difference. November 18th.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Landry. Thank you so much for that and your closing statement. And once again, you did mention your opponent, Mr. Pomes, several times. I want to just reiterate to the viewers and those watching that we did invite Mr. Louis Pomes to this debate. He did respectfully decline to join us today. However, he did participate in our earlier debate before the primary election in August. And that debate, you can go online, WDSU.com, to watch that debate. Thank you again, Mr. Wayne Landry, for your time. And again, the runoff election day is November 18th.